Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate, and we are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. What's going on, guys? This is Dave Tate. This is episode number 123. This is an AMA episode, Ask Me Anything. I just answer your questions. This is something that I wanted to build into the podcast when we launched season 3, but it's been a little hard to do because we've had so many guests. So I put this one together for that reason. Here I am stumbling with my words, right? Because somehow or another, I have to keep connection with you guys to know what topics that you're looking for. And this AMA is one of the best ways to go about doing that. Because when I ask for the questions on YouTube and Instagram, they're directly from you guys, which does a couple different things. It gives me an idea of what topics you want to see in the future, what broad topics you want to see covered. And it also gives me the opportunity to actually answer your questions, because with the way season 3 is progressing and the way the podcast is progressing, it's more about the guest than it is them answering your questions. While I use the questions that you submit for our guest, and they are extremely important in how I lay out that podcast format, it's not just me throwing them questions and answers. I want to get a little deeper into their story. I want to get deeper into their training background and go down as many rabbit holes as I possibly can for that. And because of that, a lot of the questions that you would submit typically aren't going to get answered. I try to build them in to the story as it's going there, but it is what it is. Just peppering guests with questions is not a good podcast. We kind of tried to do that in season 2 and wasn't really happy with the result. And I don't think you guys were either. So we changed it up for that reason. Before getting into your questions, I want to thank Marek Health for sponsoring the podcast. They've been our premier sponsor since starting season 3. They're a telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, or preventative health medicine, however you want to go about it. I've told you a little about my journey, with them, and all I can say at this point is it's the real deal. So if you're somebody like myself that's always got blood work done, they have an option for that. Just marekhealth.com/table talk. We have panels that are already set up for you. Just go there, order the panels, and then when they call you or you call them to place the order, use the code table talk. You'll get 10% off of that. They have another option to where you will work with a patient coordinator. That's what I call it, patient care coordinator. And they'll help determine what panels that you should get that are going to be more customized to whatever your goals are, and then work with you on reading what those panels are and what the reports look like, and then putting you in touch with one of their care providers to help you if you need prescriptions or supplementation or whatever to go with that. So check out marekhealth.com. Discount code is Table Talk. The other sponsor of the show, obviously, is elitefts.com. If you use the code Table Talk, you will get a 10% off your first order. Another thing that helps the show tremendously is our limited edition wear. I have a new one on that we're dropping today, whenever this post, Monday. It's on the site now. So there's a link that's going to be in the description. The GFH shirt, I'll tell you a little bit about this here in a second, is one of those limited edition items. All proceeds from our limited edition items go to supporting the Table Talk podcast. So while all of our sales go to support our content, the Table Talk or the limited edition items, I specifically track as a way and means to be able to see the support for the podcast. So with the GFH shirt here, this is kind of a throwback to one that we had many years ago, probably a decade, maybe longer. that was GFH with flames. The GFH, it basically stands for get fucking huge. And this was Matt Dimmel, who was a friend of mine, trained at Westside Barbell. I got a couple of good stories to tell you about him. Had GFH tattooed, on his shoulder, and a tattoo of Mighty Mouse as well. So that was kind of the motto that he lived by, was just, get fucking huge. And it didn't matter, strength-wise, size-wise, just everything, just basically live huge. So the GFH stands for that. We kind of took it to another level with this one. Instead of having it in flames, we're using the big bloated guy, is the font, for this one, which is freaking kind of awesome. So that's limited edition. The link is, again, in the description for that. Some Dimmel stories to tell you why I first did the GFH and then why I brought it back again is Matt was one of the main reasons why I came to Westside Barbell. When I first started competing as a teenager, Louis would help me out in warm-up rooms. And I just kind of knew him as, the guy from Columbus that took the time to help me out as a kid. So that sold me on the powerlifting culture, a big part of it. Matt I was introduced to him. I can't remember the year, but I mean, we're going back to probably 88, late 80s. And I lifted in a meet that was just called the Mountaineer Cup in West Virginia. And Matt was the back spotter for some reason. And, big, long, red ass hair, and just get me all, I mean, it was freaking awesome because he'd get me fired up. I didn't even really know who he was at the time until, after the squats were over, and he kind of pulled me aside and listen, buddy, you do this, you do this, you do this. And, gave me some tips. Then I find out later the dude's like 1,000-pound squatter and all this other kind of stuff. So we kind of semi-stayed in touch after that. And then over the years, built a relationship with him. And then when it came, after I graduated from college, I was trying to decide where I wanted to continue the training at, or if I wanted to continue at all, to be honest with you. And Matt was instrumental. So it was Matt, Chuck, and Louie that would be giving me calls saying, when are you coming, and that kind of stuff. So I started making trips up to train in Louie's gym, which was on Dimmer's Road. It wasn't the same Dimmer's Road that we were at for 10 or 12 years or whatever it was. It was a commercial gym he was at the time. And one of my first trips up there was, it was a weekend, a Friday, it was a Friday. So it came up on a Thursday because Friday was squat day. And by the time I got in there, everybody else already left, but Matt was there. And he was like, I'll take you through and show you how to do the squats, buddy, and all this stuff. And it was the first time I ever did box squatting. And it was a wider ass stance than I've ever used before. And I had a hard time squatting inside normal power racks at the time. So I was already what many people would call wide. But the way that they had their power racks set up, the sumo-based power rack, your feet could go underneath there. So it's like pushing my feet all the way out there. And the box wasn't really a box, it was a hassock, a footstool. And I remember doing 405, I believe it was, for 8 sets of 2 or 10 sets of 2 or whatever it was. And, we changed stances back then, kind of the way people dynamically changed their grip. So, a couple of stances were in close, then medium, then all the way out, so it was just kind of rotating the stances through there. And the pace was something I wasn't used to, but I loved it because it was every 45 seconds hitting that. And then I was just training by myself because it was just, with him basically yelling at me the whole time, which was fucking awesome with that. Motivating as hell, let's put it that way. And then went through and did all the other exercises afterwards. So it was getting a chance to use the reverse hyper before it was even patented. It was just basically a wood platform with a chain in the corner of the gym and a few other things. And I was wrecked by the time I left there. Actually, I was so fucking sore. My hips and my hamstrings and my adductors were so freaking sore. It was unbelievable. So me, of course, just coming back and forth at the time I left there, I'm like, I'm never doing that shit again. I'm going to go back to my strong stance. This just wrecked me too much. But later I learned exactly what the benefit of all that was. But that was my first training encounter with Matt, and the intensity was through the roof. and he wasn't even training. It was like he was swapping sets with me, and he was still part of the program. Or how do I explain this without you really knowing what it is? When you're training with somebody and you're going back to back, and the intensity level, what you have is going to be the same intensity level of the other person. His intensity level was higher than mine, and I was fired the fuck up. So it was something that I wasn't used to, but I freaking loved it. And then I would come back, you know, here and there over the next year or whatever it was going to be before I actually moved completely. But then after I moved completely, you know, I tore my pec before moving to Columbus. So when I came to Columbus, I was in a sling, and they had me all strapped down and almost basically casted because they were afraid I was going to, you know, train it, which I was going to. And Louis had then moved out of that commercial gym into the boxer in the basement gym. And then Matt took all the commercial stuff and made a small commercial gym called M&M's Gym. So I was doing a lot of my work at Matt's place because he had the machines, and when you're in a sling, there's only so many things you can really do. And then I would still be at Westside in the morning with, you know, the guys that are training there, just loading plate or whatever I could do, you know, to be able to help until I could get out of this stupid sling cast thing that I was in. But in the meantime, it was Matt just busting my ass at M&M's Gym at the time, which was great because it gave me time to build a foundation, to refocus on what I really wanted to do. And so when you're spending pretty much all day, you know, with the guy, you know, that it's some things that I remember. There's a lot of things I remember that I can't tell you. But one of the things I remember is, you know, he took my car one day. We went and got Chinese food after training, and he wanted to show me a quicker way to get home, you know, from where the gym was. And I shit you not, you know, he was creating alleys where alleys didn't exist. So he's literally driving through people's yards, you know, just to cut through blocks. Like, this is completely acceptable. And then trying to tell me that it's normal, that he does it all the time. And, you know, I'm thinking to myself, we're going to get fucking arrested and all this other stuff. And it's just, it's one of those things it doesn't leave my mind, because the whole time I was so confused, because to him it seemed normal. Like, this is some shit that I would do to fuck with a friend of mine. But to him, it was just, no, this is what you normally do. You just drive through people's yards. And I remember asking Louis at breakfast the next day, I was telling him the story. And he's like, no, man, he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. You know, that's completely normal to him. And I got many other stories like that. So that's part of the reason why I want to keep the GFH, you know, alive and bring it back every now and again, just to, you know, to remember him, and so other people know who he is. If you've watched Westside versus the World, you know what I'm talking about. You know who he is. And crazy and strong, no doubt about that. So getting into your questions here, the first one I'm going to go with is with the Dave Hoff interview. We talked a lot, we talked a lot. I mean, it's close to a 3-hour podcast, but we talked about dynamic bench work. And one of the questions that came through was, there's a few of them, but the question basically was saying, look, I think I'm using too much weight for my dynamic bench training. And, you know, what do you think? And I've spoken about this a lot on other podcasts. Like, how do you know how much weight to use for dynamic work? And it's an area of confusion with a lot of people, and there's several ways to go about it, which I've discussed in past podcasts and even YouTube videos. I think we did a YouTube video not too long ago trying to show you the bar speed and how to figure out what that wave's going to be. I'm going to go a little bit different route here and tell you a little bit about the history that I have of the dynamic effort method and how it was introduced to me, and then how I saw it progress over the years that I was at Westside and then beyond. When it was first introduced to me, I was training in a gym in Toledo, Ohio. That was Hard Body's gym, and we had a powerlifting crew at the time. And one of the guys came up and showed me an article by Louis about dynamic bench work, and something about, you know, 8 sets of 3 or 2, or, whatever it was at the time, and the percentages, 60, 70%, 70, whatever it was. I can't remember what it was. All I know is I looked at it and said, this is bullshit. There's no way that you're going to get stronger doing that. The weight's too light. You know, the volume's too heavy. It kind of went counter to everything that I've been learning in college and everything I learned in the 12, 15 years of powerlifting before that. So I just wrote it off as just complete horseshit, you know, that this is just somebody writing crap for Powerlifting USA just to, you know, build a name, sell a program or whatever it was going to be. And I didn't even read it that close. I just kind of dismissed the whole thing. Didn't even realize at the time that it was Louis, and it was the same Louis that's been helping me, you know, in warm-up rooms for years and all the other stuff. And that was my first impression of it, because I was used to just using basic linear periodization, and, you know, weights go up before the meet, reps go down, you know, intensity, percentage-wise intensity, percentage of bar weight, you know, would scale up, volume scales down, basic linear periodization. And that's kind of all I knew, and that's all I believed in. And I kind of understood block a little bit, but this was kind of like way out in the other, it just didn't make sense. I understood heavy light days, stuff like that, but this just didn't make sense. So going back to when I started making those trips to Westside on the weekends that I was telling you about, one of the first trips was, you know, squatting with Matt. One of the second ones was coming in to bench. And I didn't realize on bench day that they actually trained someplace else. So when I came in on that Sunday, there's basically nobody there. And I believe it was Doris or somebody said, you know, look, they don't bench here. They bench out at some other place else. So I just waited, you know, until I think Jimmy Ritchie, Chuck, or somebody, a couple people came back, and then did my bench work then, kind of went home that Sunday, and that is what it is. And then when I started making trips back and forth, it was on the weekends, you know, so I would come and, you know, squat Friday, then bench Sunday, and then go back Sunday evening. And the bench, I'm pausing because it's a little weird story, because you couldn't bench out at Tim Van Horn's place unless you had a 500-pound bench. You had to have an elite total or a 500-pound bench. Now the problem was, and this is before I tore my pec, so the problem was I had those. I had a few elites, and I had many benches over 500 pounds, but they weren't at elite, or I'm sorry, they were not at Westside Barbell. So it didn't count. So I wasn't allowed to go out to Van Horn's until I did a meet in total elite or bench 500 pounds, just to be able to go out there to train, which I kind of thought was bullshit, because, you know, years of bench, but it was Louis' way, right? It was his rules. So I jumped in a meet, whatever the next meet was that was close, bench the 500 pounds just so I could train out there, because the people that were training at Westside's commercial gym at that time were like a C crew. You know, if you got an A crew, a B crew, and a C crew, it was like the C crew. And I wasn't going to drive all that way to train with people that were weaker than the people I was already training with. You know, I wanted to train with people who were stronger than what I was. So I did what I had to do to be able to go out there. So long story short with that, so when I get to the point where I do that, which was still stupid to me thinking back, but like I said, he had his rules and he stuck to his rules. We'd meet for breakfast, then we'd go bench out at this Tim Van Horn's place. So it wasn't really Westside. You had to earn your way out there, which is kind of a cool aspect, because if you didn't have, like I said, if you didn't have the leader of 500-pound bench, you weren't able to go out there. That may have changed over the years. You know, I didn't pay that much attention, but once I got out there, I do remember the speed work that I was using was between 365 and 405. So it stayed the same each week. It didn't wave at all. It was just 365 for 4 sets, 405 for 4 sets. And it was with Kenny Patterson, myself. I think Louis was on my bench, and Tom Waddle, and Tim Van Horn was on the bench at the same time too. Now we would change the weight a little bit, take a quarter off, put a plate on. So it adjusted for everybody's, you know, strength level and percentages. And at the time it was, I believe Kenny and I were the end of a rotation, so out of the 5 people, and it moves fast. You know, it moved really fast. You know, so there's, you know, a liftoff guy, got a left spotter, right spotter, person getting ready, and the person on the bench, and that just rotates through, and it never stops. It doesn't move. You know, it just goes from that route. at some period of time, I think it was Tim, got hurt, and he had to use, I think at the time he was using 315 and had to drop it down to 275 because I don't know if it was a package shoulder. I don't know what the problem was, but he had to reduce the weight that he was using. And then the next meet that he went to, he broke a huge PR. So then Louis kind of took that as, oh, now wait a minute, something's going on here. So then we all started using less weight and the benches started going up. So I believe that beginning percentage was probably 70 to 80%, somewhere in that range. And as time progressed, it dropped and it dropped and it dropped. And so even before chains came in, I remember using 275, and this was based upon a 585 shirt bench, a 540 raw bench is pretty much what it was. So and whatever percentage that was, 275 was the normal weight, and then maybe throwing on 315 for half of the sets. When chains came into the picture, and this was several years later, chains came into the picture, we didn't change anything with the weight. We just threw a couple chains on each side. And then a year or so after that, when bands came on, then the percentages started to change a little bit because the tension of the bands at the bottom, it's still there, so it's still weight. So as my bench continued to progress, some of my last speed work that was there when my bench was the strongest would have been with 185 with a mini band doubled up on each side for half the sets, and maybe 2 1/4 for half the sets. Kenny's bench, went through the stratosphere. Hit went down to like 315, 365. Now, there was a time period in there where the band tension just got radically high. So the point I'm trying to make here is if I had, 540, let's say anywhere between like a 520 and 550 raw bench, if you want to call it that. So I'm basing it on a close grip, 2 board press, floor press, stuff like that. So it's kind of where I'm gauging where my raw bench would have been at the time. If I was using 185 with a double mini band to be able to have the speed and 2 1/4 at the highest for that. And then I'm seeing people today that are benching 350, 360, telling me that, 185 and 225 with a band is way too light. I don't get it. So as Dave was talking about in the podcast, it's about force production, and you don't want to worry that much about the weight is, but how much force that's being produced with that. And then that leads into, well, then what percentage is that? It's that becomes a little fogged up because how good is your form? How long you've been training? There's a lot of variables that play into that. So in the video that I was talking about earlier, an easy way to do this is just slowly start working the barbell weight up for just one training session. And when you feel like you get to a weight where you can really start applying maximum force, now you're not going to do that with a bar. You're not going to do it with 95 pounds. When the weight gets to that point that you feel like you can start pushing with maximum force, start paying attention to how fast it's moving, what it feels like, and film it, and look at it. And then just jump 10, 15 pounds, maybe 20 pounds every set for the next 6 sets and start to look where the bar starts to slow down, where your form starts to go to hell. Then you're going to find a range. Somewhere in that range, that's going to be where your percentage is. That's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is you can base it off some of your max effort lifts, like a floor press, if the bar is close to touching your chest, things like that. Then it would be the 50%. If you're going to put chains on, you're not going to change the weight that's on the bar. If you're going to use bands, you're going to take whatever the tension is in the bottom of the bench off of the barbell when you do that. When you're talking about progressions, though, I think this is something that a lot of people overlooked when Matt was out here and even Dave was out here. Your speed work doesn't always have to be with the straight bar. There's different variations. There's different bars that you can use for your speed work. There's things like a rackable cambered bar. You can use that. There's the American cambered press bar. You can use that. You can use I'm trying to think, it's a close grip incline. You can use that. You can use the floor press. That's another option. You can use what's called a soft touch. So you're just gonna bring it down and just barely touch your shirt on your, not bench shirt, your t-shirt, barely touch your t-shirt and then press it back up. That's another way, another variation of speed work. You can also do, you know, a no touch bench, which now I think is a Spotto bench, but you know, go down about a half inch, an inch off of your chest and blast up from there. So there's all these other variations that you can train speed work with throughout the training cycle. And it doesn't, you bring it, you can make, the next question is, well, how do you rotate them in? Well, the easy answer is however you want. I mean, over a period of time, you'll just kind of figure out what you should do for yourself and just stick with that. If you really have no clue whatsoever, then get more specific as close to the, as you get closer to the meet. So if you're, you know, 6 weeks out from the meet, yeah, it probably should start to be a regular straight bar. You know, maybe the chains and bands as well, but definitely a straight bar. The further, then, you know, say before that, it could be an American press bar. Before that, it could be the rackable cambered bar. So you're going from the least specific to the more specific as you work into the meet. Can also base it upon how your joints feel. You know, if your shoulder feels jacked up or your pec feels jacked up or whatever it's going to be, then maybe you want to use the American camber press bar, spin it around, or maybe do the speed work with a shoulder saver pad, or the floor press for the speed work. There's those variations there with, but just by changing the bar. And that's before we start, you can put bands on it, you can put chains on it. So now the options become endless on how you can rotate that speed work through. One of the worst things that I think you can do is to always use the exact same thing, just the straight bar without any type of modifications for that. Even if it's a beginner, you still want to rotate the bars out, but you want to keep the specificity a little closer. So if it's a beginner and you're trying to work on them with upper back tightness and, you know, keeping the elbow and wrist stacked, then you probably don't want to use things like the American press bar or something like that, which is going to put them in a neutral grip if you're still trying to work on the technical aspects of stacking the wrist and the elbow. So you want to, you know, use the other bars that are going to be more specific for that. There's no magical stack or rotation or series of movements that are going to stack upon one another for dynamic work or max effort work for that matter. So, and now if you're using these different bars and these different styles, that becomes a little bit easier to figure out what that 50%, you know, starting range is going to be, because those things are a lot of times going to be what your max effort exercises are. So if you have a max effort exercise of a close grip incline press or a slight decline, or, you know, a two board press, or, you know, any of these other movements, you should know pretty close to what your max is based upon the max effort work. And then you know what the percentages are. So then that makes that common sense as well. There's other ways as well outside of the exercise. You can play around with the tempo. You can go slower tempo down, you know, hold for a second and then push up with as maximum force as you possibly can. So there's other ways to go about rotating these dynamic movements if you just think a little bit more outside the box. Dave talked a little bit about, you know, the time under tension, you know, how long does that set last? You can play around with that based upon, you know, how long you're going to hold the bar before you lower it. If you're going to hold the bar before you rack it, that's one way. You can change that by adding a rep or two at instead of the typical 8 sets of 3, 8 sets of 5, or whatever it's going to be. Just try to keep it within the optimal range. You can look at Perlipin's chart to kind of get an idea of what I would consider the optimal range is there. So you can play around with that. You can play around with the distance that the bar's traveling as well, because the distance is also going to be time under the straining time as well. So if you're going to use, you know, a 2 board or a 3 board, then maybe you do want to take it out, hold it for a 1 or 2 count, then do the set, hold it for 1 or 2, and then rack it back just to increase that time under tension for that set, or add another rep in there. I'm trying not to overcomplicate things. I'm just trying to explain things in a little bit easier manner where people can understand it, because it's not really that complex if you look at what basically is going on here. You want to push with maximum force and teach yourself to push with maximum force, A. B, you want to reinforce the best technique you possibly can. C, you want to be able to do it in the healthiest way that you possibly can. So if something's jacked up and you can find a different way of doing that exercise that's to be able to work around the issue, then you're going to work around the issue instead of working through the issue, because the goal is the explosive force and reinforcing the technique. Or if there's a different bench style that's going to better reinforce where the technical breakdown is, it's going to make more sense to be able to use that. So you want to find what those technical weaknesses are, and even the physical weakness to a point, and then kind of build that through there, instead of this is just what you're supposed to do, this is what it says, and this is what I'm going to do. As the meat gets closer, and the specificity is going to go up a little bit with that. So the progressions are kind of what I'm talking about. So the first thing is to understand what the options are in the toolbox, what are the different tools, and then what are the progressions going to be able to be with that moving forward. So for most people, yeah, they are using too much weight on their dynamic day, 100%, you know, and I get it, but what you have to understand is what is the objective of why you're doing it. Because if you're doing it for repetition type training, you know, to build stronger sets of 5, to build stronger sets of 3, then it's probably, this is not the method you want to be doing that with. You know, that's the repetition method, or in some way you could probably push it off to that max effort day. That's not what this is for. You know, this is for the technical and the being able to push with more explosive force, with maximum force. Okay, I'm gonna jump to the next question here, which is another bench related question. And it's about shaking. You know, they take it out and they shake. You know, and I get what they're talking about. The muscles are shaking and the bar's not stable. It's lats, man. It's a lot of people have this issue. And sorry about that. A lot of people I've seen have this issue, and you tell them it's their lats, and then they don't consistently train the lats. So if it's the lats, then you need to do a little bit of lat work, in my opinion, every time you come in the gym. So some days it may be vertical pulls, some day horizontal pulls. Then the next thing that's going to happen is, well, which exercise? Doesn't fucking matter. Just train your lats, because this is either, you know, you don't know how to hold the position because your lats just don't know what to do, or you don't have the isometric strength to be able to hold the lats tight in that position, or you don't even know how to get your lats tight in that position. So the first thing is, you know, do you know how to get your lats tight? Do you know how to flex your lats? So that's going to be the first thing. If you don't know how to do that, what's the best way to learn how to do that? I think doing more isolation type movements that are going to give that mind muscle connection, or whatever you want to call it, with your lats, so you know what it's supposed to feel like. Or just lay down on the bench, put your hands on the bar, push the bar to the end of the J cups without taking the bar out. Just apply force to the bar, and you're going to feel your lats flex. That's what we're talking about. You're going to feel that. That's what needs to become stronger. So you build your lats. And if it is the lat strength, it's going to take time, you know, to get your lats stronger. It's not like, if it's an activation thing, yeah, you can do stuff for a couple weeks and boom, it's going to go away. With the shaking thing, that's normally not going to be the problem. We're talking, it's going to take time. It might take a few months, you know, to be able to get the lats strong enough to be able to do that. And you can tell by looking at the people that it's their lats as well, because they don't have any lats, they don't have a back. So you got to build the back. If it was so easy to build a back, everybody would have a giant fucking back, right? But and then you tell them what it is, and then they'll do it for a couple weeks, and then they just stop doing it. Or they don't change the exercises, or they start looking for this miracle exercise instead of just putting in the work. And when I say putting in the work, there's a couple things that need to go in with building the lats for the bench and just building the lats in general. You have to put in the heavy work to be able to build the muscle. So I don't want to sit there and say that, you just have to heave shit up. I don't necessarily believe that's true, but you have to put in the heavy work to be able to build it. But you also need to put in work that's going to be through that full range of motion with a big stretch and a real tight contraction. So let's say tempo type work as well. So you need both intent in there. So some exercises you might be able to find it's really hard for you to be able to get that full range of motion and the mental concentration that you need to be able to contract your lats. So then it's probably going to be an exercise you're just going to train heavier. Other exercises, it just doesn't make sense to go really, really heavy on because it is more of a contraction stretch type of movement. So mix those in there. So you're mixing the intent. One of them's the intent to learn how to flex your lats, or let's just say to get a big lat pump, however you want to go about framing it. Where the other one is going to be, to be able to move the weight and make sure that your arms are not doing the work. Focus on pulling with the elbows, or actually for powerlifting, I like to have people focus on pulling with from the wrists instead of the elbows, bodybuilding more of the elbows. Either whatever works for you, is what you want to be able to do, but it has to consistently be done over a period of time. And that doesn't mean doing it for a couple months and not doing anything for a while, so consistency kind of plays into this as well. Next exercise, our next question, I'm trying to read these without my glasses, so this is going to be interesting. Will Elite FTS, basically it's, am I looking to, what's the exit plan for Elite FTS? There's been several companies acquired over the years by other companies. It's basically what's the exit plan with Elite FTS. And I think I answered this a little bit ago in one of the podcasts as well. And I have evaluation done, and I've had it done by 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different people over the years. And it is a metric that I use for the company. But what I still think a lot of you guys don't understand is you have to have a profitable company for it to have a large valuation, so that our profit goes into our content. I don't know how many times I can keep saying this, so we build our content based upon the profit. So yes, we have to keep a certain degree of profit to be able to bring in new items and do stuff like that. But if our sales take a hit, I don't even have the profit to bring in for new items and stuff like that, because it's not like you can just lay off content people and then bring them back on when you need it. You can't do that. So it ends up being a static cost with that. So this is what creates the problem of who's going to buy that? Who's going to buy a company that's main interest is building the profit to be able to put back into content to give to people for free? What valuation does that really carry? So what the valuation would essentially be, and I've been told this by many people, is the mailing list, the sales and all that. The valuation is acquiring the company, acquiring the assets, getting rid of the content, and then just selling the product. And that's going to create, 3 times, 4 times higher profit than what we currently have, but then that's not why the company was founded. So there's the conundrum, right? Where the answer is just to sell twice as much, which we've been trying to do for a decade, now, and or figure out how to monetize the content, be able to help with that. So that's why I'm not like actively looking for any of this, because I know what would happen if they're going to do that. Because hell, if I bought the company, I know what I would do. And what's the least profitable components of the company? I mean, this is any acquisition, right? What's the most profitable? What's the least profitable? Get rid of the least profitable and double down on the most profitable. But that's not what the aim of the company is. So that's what kind of plays into that whole thing. So yes, I understand, and I've seen some of the acquisitions that have happened, and I understand why they happen. I'm a CEO as well. I know how much fucking time, effort, work, stress. I know I've been doing it for 24 years. So I understand why people want to get out of it, especially if there's other revenue sources that they have. Because there's better ways, there's definitely better ways to earn a living and make money, but that's, like I said, it's not what I get into it for. My passion, my drive is different than what theirs are. My passion and drive is to be able to help you guys that are on the other end. You know, that's where it comes from. That's why I put in all the hours. That's why I do everything that I do, is so we can pass on this information to help other people. Yes, I totally understand. 90-some%, 95% are never going to buy from us. I fucking get that. I understand that. I have the metrics to prove that. I get that. But what about the 5 or 10% that do? You know, that's that. I mean, it's in time, you know, it will, as things scale, it becomes better, right? Then that changes all that. But at this point in time, no matter how hard stress and all that ever gets, that's not even on my radar to do, because I've worked too fucking hard for too long to be able to get where it is now, to be able to just bail. And aside from that, the valuation isn't going to be enough to make it even worth bailing on, you know? So what is the exit plan? The exit plan is to grow the fucker, you know, to a point to where it can self-sustain and the content can self-sustain without having to just push shit out there all the time. Now, to do it all over again, are the things I would have done differently? Yeah, probably. You know, it's a tough road to climb when you're dumping all your profits into, you know, content. But it's the road that I chose, and it's the road that I'm sticking with. You know, so that's what it is. People either see the value in what we put out or they don't. You know, and if they don't see the value, then I'm doing a shitty job of putting out the value. Or on the other side, we're just putting out shitty content, you know, which could be the case too, because who's going to want to support shitty content? So it's all a balance that kind of goes with that. So I don't know how else to really answer that one. Next is, will you have average Joes on the podcast? Yes, I did say that when we started season 3 or when we closed season 2, one of those two, probably both times. What I didn't expect was the number of guests that we've been getting, you know. So over the last few years, you know, I disconnect myself from a lot of different things. So I wear a lot of different hats, right? So over the last several years, you know, through the grapevine and, you know, through, through different sources, what I'm trying to get at is, for the last few years, I've been told that, you know, nobody wants to come out here. They don't want to travel out here. You know, we're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wants to travel in the middle of nowhere. Basically that, you know, finding guests is just a huge pain in the ass. And that's what I just assumed was true, you know, until, you know, start having somebody else ask for guests and myself start asking for guests. And now I got guests booked all the way to October. So that falls on me, you know, from, you know, having a shitty system in place for how this was getting done, where now that we have better systems in place to make sure that, you know, guests are being asked to be able to come out here. I don't know what it was before, you know, which again, that falls on me. So if I don't know what the system was before, who's the person that's supposed to be in charge of creating the systems? That's me. So it falls on me. So what I'm trying to get at is, I didn't think that I was going into this. I thought we might be able to get a guest a month, you know, if we're lucky, and we got a guest a week, maybe even more, all the way into November right now, and a fuck ton that are more than willing to do a podcast when they're in the area. So that's a whole lot of others as well. So that changed my plan a little bit, because I want to be able to do the AMAs like I'm doing here, but where do we fit those in? Because, you know, some weeks there are 2 podcasts scheduled with guests, so we can't. There's only so much we can do, going back to what I was saying before. We have a limited amount of resources until the content generates revenue. So we get more revenue generated from the content, we can expand the resources. You can do them every fucking day if we have more resources. So we're capped on what we can really do and still get other things done based upon the resources from that. So this AMA is something that to be frank, does very well on our podcast. It does well on YouTube. So it's definitely something that you guys want. We have to build this in. I was hoping just to build it in with cancellations. We haven't really had any cancellations either. So that kind of plays into that as well. The other one is to have the average Joe out here, to be able to, ask training questions like what you guys are doing here. But the limitation on what you guys are doing here is the depth. I have to expand and make a lot of guesses. That's not the word I'm looking for. I have to add context to a lot of the questions I'm being asked here, which may or may not be the context behind the questions that you guys are asking. Now, if I had somebody out here, I can go deep into whatever context they are in to be able to go further. And I think that is a hell of a podcast, a very educational podcast for you guys. So yes, we're going to work that in there. One that it's not really a podcast, but one thing we're going to do on July 6th is J.M. Blakely's going to come out. He's going to come out to podcast again, but he's also going to come out for content. So what we did is we set up a survey to be able to pop out for people if they're interested to come out and work with JM. We've done this before in the past. So JM will take you through in the exercises that he wants to show, and basically you train with JM is essentially what it is. And there's no cost for that, so the survey is in the description field from that. And, we'll vet out based upon training age and, strength and stuff like that, so it fits. We still want to fit the demographic that you guys are. So we're not bringing somebody in that's completely off the demographic profile. So nobody's even going to give a shit. There's nothing really to learn from it, but that's live now, I believe. So, there's one way that we're going to try to touch base with that. And then we'll probably use the same type of system when it comes into bringing out the average person. The way I think that we're going to have to do that, though, is it's going to be on a, what do you call it when somebody cancels and you got to like fill a spot real quick? Like a last minute. It's going to be like on a last minute basis because I can do an AMA if somebody cancels, or I could do one of these two. So what I think we'll do is once we get through this JM thing, we'll create another survey to be able to put people out, to bring people out for what I'm talking about, but then just basically let them know, this might be on a, I don't want to say completely last minute basis. If we get a cancellation, it's usually going to be with a guest. They'll let us know usually 5 days ahead of time. So it won't be a super long notice. So it will be a short notice type of thing. And that would be a really good way for us to be able to build that in there as well. So yes, that's definitely something we want to do, but it's also something that we're going to do with JM, not the podcast part, but just working with JM, which is live right now. Next question is, and I've seen this for the last couple months. It may even be the same person because the question is worded the same, which is, please set the confusion straight for somebody that's a complete beginner that's interested in strength training. Should they do conjugate? Should they do linear? Should they do whatever it is? And if it is the same person, I'm going to sound a little bit like a dick, but if it's the same person and you've been asking the same question for 2 months and you haven't even started training yet, then you're already fucking up. So if it's a complete total beginner, there is no perfect program. Just go fucking train. Just start doing lifts. Just start doing compound movements. If anything that you search for beginning weight training is going to be fine. It's, if you want my answer for it, it's going to be train, 2-3 times a week, use compound lifts, barbell type movements, and master the movement and then work the strength up from there. If the form's a complete total wreck, it's going to be. You're a total beginner. As you get stronger, your form will get better too. So yes, technique is a huge component. And it's something that I talk about over and over and over and over and over, because as somebody becomes intermediate and our demographic is going to be people that put training as one of their top 4 priorities, and they have 5, 6, 7 years training experience. Technique's a huge thing because a little bit off here and there is going to make a huge difference. for a beginner, you know, a lot of the technical issues that a complete total beginner has is going to be fixed just by getting stronger. You know, so if you can't squat the bar, you start with body weight squats. You know, there shouldn't be that much confusion for somebody that is a total beginner. You just need to get in the weight room a couple times a week, start mastering the barbell lifts. You don't know what they are, you know, squat, bench, deadlift, barbell rows, you know, overhead press, barbell curls, close grip bench press, you know, just the real simple core shit that you can find on Elite FTS, you can find anywhere. Just start doing those movements. What's the frequency? Who cares? You're a beginner. Do the same freaking movements 3 times a week. Start light and just slowly progress over a period of time, and you'll get stronger. The last thing that you want to do, which it sounds like is happening here, is not do anything because nobody's telling you exactly what you should do, which is kind of bullshit, you know, because who's going to want to even give a fuck and tell you what to do if you already don't have the accountability and discipline to hold yourself responsible for what you're doing? You know, so that should be the question. If I see, you know, if it's the same person again, the next question should be, look, I've been training for a few months doing this program, you know, these exercises, and now it's starting to get stale. What should I do next? Because the question that you're asking right now is just, it's a very simple question that's rooted in just starting to do the movements. You know, I don't know really where to go from there. If anybody else can help them out, you know, post in the comments. But, you know, we all started the same way, man. You know, I started with a cement weight set, you know, I got for Christmas, and found a fucking book, and it had, I don't know, 40 exercises in it. I did every exercise every day. I mean, it's completely probably not what you should do, but most people share the same story, you know, but I learned how to do those exercises, and I also learned that it was something I really liked to do. Then when I learned what I really, really liked to do, then I wanted to learn more about it. Then when I went to learn more about it, you know, more of the answers started to come from there. But you go back into the history with most people, very, very, very beginning, it's kind of the same shit. You know, they went to a gym, didn't know what they were doing, and just started lifting shit, you know, and, you know, watching what other people were doing and doing that. You know, I think you're making it way too complicated, way too complicated. Next one is how to deload. Should you wait until you need it or anticipate it? Well, the answer is a little bit of both. If you always wait until you need it, you're going to be overreaching. If you wait until you need it, then it's going to take longer to be able to come out of that point. The question with this that I always kind of fall back into is, if your program is set up good, you know, then this isn't going to be a problem, you know, because it's going to be, you know, working in waves, you know, outside of the beginner, right? But even the beginner, over a period of time, the newbie gains are going to slow down, and then it starts to work in waves a little bit. If it's working in waves and it's structured and laid out as a decent program, half of that is, it's already, more than half of it's already solved, because it's built in that way. You know, the other thing is, life throws a lot of curveballs. So there's deloads that get thrown in with that as well. So structuring in, you know, and it's, how do you define a deload? You know, so if I look at training, and I'm very conjugate based, very conjugate biased. So I'm seeing dynamic effort waves, I'm seeing max effort, you know, waves and structures, and repetition method waves and structures. They all deload at different points, you know. So if the dynamic effort's waving in 3-week waves, and the max effort's changing every one to 2 weeks, then the repetition stuff's changing every 4 to 5 weeks. What do you mean by the deload? Is the deload like, how often should that dynamic day change? Or how often should the max effort day change? Or how often should the complete entire program just drop down? You know, so it's a very confusing question to me, because I think what most people think is this is a deload week. I just need to go in and not just do light shit, which that's true. But what's the volume of the light stuff? Because the volume could actually be higher and the workload actually be higher. It's just a different stimulus and it's lighter stuff that's easier to recover from. So deload, my question, I guess, coming back is deload from what? The volume, the intensity, the workload, you know, what exactly? Because all these should inherently be built into a program. And then if you're using any auto regulation, which I'm a huge proponent of, you won't need it at all. Because if it don't feel right in the gym, you're gonna know to back down. Or you're gonna know you need to, you know, pick your ass up and push through it. That's something that you can only learn over time and experience is, do you feel like shit because you just mentally don't want to be there and you just need a kick in the ass, or do you feel like shit because you really feel like shit and you don't need to be there? Knowing that difference, the only way you'll ever know that difference is for you to figure it out. You know, there are other ways, right? So, I can see people debating with me right now saying there's different units that can measure this, and this, and this, whatever. I get that. 99.9% of the people are never going to have access to that shit. And then most of the time, it still has its flaws, you know, so as does the person trying to make the decisions for yourself. But the longer you do it, the more experience you have. You need to figure out how to push when you're supposed to push and when to back down when you're supposed to back down and go from there. So that's my answer for the deload. It's probably not what a lot of people are looking for, but it is what it is. How do you deal with family who don't understand that lifting is your top priority, or lifting is a top priority? Is it? That's where I'm going to go first. Because if it is, why are you worried about it? Where do you go from there? You know, it's a lot of what I'm trying to do with some of the guests this season is to bring in people that have put their sport, lifting, or whatever, as their top priority, or one of their top priorities. If you think anything that's going to be one of your top priorities, even if it's one of the top 3 priorities in your life, isn't going to have pushback from people, you're out of your fucking mind. You're out of your mind. There's always going to be that, you know, so it's just a matter of how bad you want it, how bad you don't. If it's really a priority, then it really shouldn't even be a question. You know, I'm not going to give you the confirmation to be able to go and tell your family members, well, Dave Tate said I should tell you just to fuck off. I'm not going to give you that, because if you're asking the question, then it's probably not, you know, and it's not that high of a priority. So then you got to figure out where it is, and then what you're willing. There's a give take, you know, what balance that you're willing that you're going to have with that, you know. So if it's that balance, that's what you need to deal with. So I can't give you the answer that you're looking for. You know, I can tell you that I've burned through my competitive careers a lot of fucking training partners, a lot of friends, sort of, you know. If they're really friends, they would support what you're really interested in doing, right? So it's, you know, so I can say, you know, training partners, friends, you know, family to a degree, you know, but you only live once, man. And if that's what I wanted, I still get them business now, you know. So if that's what you want to do and you're not willing to do the things that you need to do to be able to move it forward, then that's on you. That's not on anybody else, but that's on you. You know, so yeah, I'm trying to fucking motivate you in some way or another, but there's no way to motivate the fact that you have to learn how to turn all that shit down, because what it does is it takes your focus away from what you're really trying to do. You know, so if you're so distracted with all this other stuff over here, but then you can't focus on what you really have to get done, that's not your family, that's not other people, that's you. And that other shit that you're focusing on that's distracting you, that can be fucking the news, it can be TV, it can be Netflix, it can be fucking Instagram, it can be all this other stuff. All that's a distraction too. So you can't sit here and say, you know, look, my family's sucking my time away from my training while you're fucking on social media 4 hours a day. That doesn't make sense to me. Because then what? Social media is more fucking important than your family and your training? That can't be true, because that's just validating the fact you suck, and that's why you suck. You know, so if you really give a fuck about it, look at all those other things that are sucking your time. Get rid of the ones that don't really have any benefit. Because let me put it this way. If these things over here are your top priority, that's where your focus should be. Elite FTS, focus, trust, strength, right? Do you have the focus where it needs to be for you to accomplish what you want to accomplish, right? And then do you trust the system and the process that you're using to be able to move through that, right? Because if you don't have trust and faith that or at least know where you're going, that you're on the right path to be able to go where you need to go, so you're not even buying in, then that's not going to happen either. And then do you have the strength and the balls to be able to fucking do what you're supposed to do? Sometimes the balls means turning off all those other distractions. Now, when you look at all those other distractions, for a lot of people, that's 70% of their time. So they turn off a lot of that crap that's sucking their time away. They have more time than what they really think. And then all of a sudden, family isn't really the problem. There's plenty of time for that, you know, with the other things that play into all that, right? Now, that's assuming that it's not the other, you know, there's other, I get it. You know, I've been told every reason coming up through it. I started competing when I was 13, right? So I've been told every reason why training was going to ruin my life. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. Isn't that up to me to decide? You know, won't I'll decide that? You know, when I pass, is it a waste? Is it not a waste? That's my decision. It's your decision. Who has the right to make that decision? You. You know, so just think a little bit. You know, I think if you put things into a little bit different perspective, reframe it some, it'll become a little bit more clear for you. All right, on to the next one. What did I do when I tore my tricep? What did I do to help my tricep? All right, I'm not a physical therapist, I'm not a doctor, all those things. So any injury that I've had, basically the same process is, what is it? Right, that's the first thing I need to figure out. As soon as it happens, what is it? What is the issue exactly? You know, especially if it's swelling and bleeding and all this other kind of crap. So the first thing that I did was get an ultrasound of it to be able to see if it was tendon detached or not detached, because that determines which path is going to move, right? So if it's completely detached, then I got to figure out, all right, well, what does that mean? Does that just mean it's going to look odd, but still kind of work? Or does it mean that it's never going to be able to extend my arm again and it has to be reattached? So I have to know what that is, because that determines the path forward. So I got that done as soon as I could, which was then 2-3 days. You know, by that time my arm had turned into a balloon from that. And then once it's there and it's like, okay, look, it's a partial tear, you know, then it's okay, here's what it is. I have to, because it swelled like crazy. So the first thing was I got to contain the swelling. So I can't do a lot of movement stuff, because it's just going to put more blood in there at that point in time. Now the blood is helping healing, it will help push the other shit that's in there swelling out. But when it's that close, we got to flush this shit out, you know. So that's, you know, elevation, you know, just anything to be a vibration crap, you know, stuff to just kind of get it moving, to be able to get it out. When I was able to get range of motion back enough to start doing light movements, I started doing light movements. So within a week or so, light restricted range movements. And then the first goal is to get back the range of motion to where it was before. once that range of motion can return to where it was before. Now, sometimes if it's super, super swollen, it's going to be compromised just because of that. So getting it back to where it was before. And then when it's there, I personally like to implement in the exercise that I heard it with as soon as I can, because I know that's going to work the same area that fucked it up. So I'll put that in there with restricted range, higher repetition, stability type work. If it's a band bell or tsunami bar, just holding it, so it's vibrating, anything to get that area to start contracting, to start moving, to put the blood in there. And then, after that main work, then the full range, what can I get through a full range of motion, say a one-arm tricep crossbody extension, standing cable extensions with strap pulling it way back, just getting that full range that I can. So it's the stability work, vibration type work, full range work. And then as it gets a little bit better, the strength work, moving back in there while still doing all my other training that I can. So that's essentially what I've been doing. I would still say, talk to a physical therapist, talk to all those other, cover all your bases with that. But I'm hard-headed. If the tendon's still attached to me, it has to be worked, and the swelling thing was, a lot of that was associated to meds I was on at the time as well, that kind of played into that some. So that made things look a lot worse than what it really was. So lesson learned from that one as well. How did I eat when competing, or how did I normally eat? So everybody, I kind of know how JM feels with the JM diet, right? Because everybody associates him with that bulking diet, and I kind of get associated with that, as well. Something I did for literally 3 or 4 weeks, which has always been stated, where it seems like it's, oh my God, Dave lived that way for 10 years. It's not like that at all. Before coming to Westside, I ate very clean, because I was trying to stay in a 242 weight class, and my weight would get up to like 260. So then it's, trying to figure out how to manage that weight class. So, I mean, back then it was different, back then it was, I can't even remember the percentages now, but, say 1 gram of protein, it was about 240 grams of protein. The fats were low. I always kept the fats low, too low, like under 100 grams of fats, and the rest of it is made up of carbs, 4,000, 5,000 calories or something like that. I used to track it a lot, but then I just quit tracking it because it just ends up, you can kind of portion out, this is what it's supposed to be. It's either, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, just old school bodybuilding type of diet, for fuck ever. And then I don't want to say cheat meals, but I ate what I wanted, kind of when I wanted, if I felt like I needed it. It wasn't often, it's 3-4 times per week. It's not like I was on this strict bodybuilding diet, but there was a weight class that I was trying to contend with. And, at the time, it's what I thought I had to do to be able to build muscle. Now, getting through that, then coming to Westside and then moving up a weight class, I started to realize that carbs were far more important for me than protein. And I think it really wasn't so much that, it was just more, the higher my carbs were, the less that my body required the protein, because carbs are kind of protein sparing. So your body doesn't need to break down the protein for energy if you have an abundance of carbs. So, and I also found the carbs kept my muscles more full, that kind of crap. So tons of fucking carbohydrates. A lot of that was supplemented with Ultra Fuel, some carbohydrate powder. I think for a long time we used this, farm fucking maltodextrin carbohydrate, which was gross, but it had the calories. Keep in mind, I'm broke as fuck, so you're trying to figure out how to do all this with not very much money, so that played a big role into it as well. That was most of the time. And again, if I, could afford or could have other shit, I'd have the other stuff. Now my weight, trying to get into the 308s, things changed. It was very hard for me. The first sticking point really was like at 280. So then it would be, okay, I'm trying to think of how the McDonald's meal went, because it was like a value fucking meal. So like a burger was I could get like 2 double cheeseburgers, and I think it was just 2 double cheeseburgers for like $2 or some shit like that. So I would have that, and then an ultra fuel, and it'd be 800 and 900 calories. Supposedly the protein was going to be. That's where that stuff started to come in, and that was a lot of the reason why I had a really hard time breaking, that getting my weight higher, is because the foods were too clean, too often, and it was a lot of it, because at this point I'm training people and working as a trainer, so I can actually buy food, and thank you to Matt Dimmel and Louie as well when I first came to Columbus, because they were buying my groceries for a while, so that helped too, so you can't just live on fucking ultra fuel and maltodextrin and whatever, the chicken breast or whatever it was. And when that came, and then I started to put in wider variety of foods, and more junk food started to come in to be able to get into that calorie surplus. So it did flip, to where, say, 4,000 calories would have been clean, and then another 2,000 was shit, and it worked. So of course anybody that's what their main goal is, you're like, well, fuck, I need to go another 1,000 calories. So then it ends up flipping a little bit. So towards the later years, it was pretty much more 50-50 on what that was. But even if it was that junk crap, if it was Chinese food or McDonald's or whatever it was always like 3 double cheeseburgers and then just 2 of the buns, stacking it on there. Basically it was just for the cheapest, crappiest protein I guess I could find from that. So the majority of the time was that, until it was really stuck. And then with JM helping me to finally get that over that 290 range and be able to hold it in there, then it's like, okay, I need to keep in a certain amount of this shit, to be able to keep the calories up, where there's better ways to go about doing it. But that was the cheapest way to be able to do it at the time, where, now I used a lot of trail mix as well, which I'd make myself, which was peanuts, raisins, cashews, almonds, all mixed in a big Ziploc bag, shake it up, and just eat handfuls of the shit whenever I could. That was a big part of it. Sodium was a big part. I'd sodium everything. I'd put salt on everything. So yeah, that was that. Now, I guess the takeaway from that would be it was more clean than, for a long time, than what it needed to be. Then it probably hit about the right balance for a while, and then it became more off balance in the other direction, and that created issues with leverages, where I couldn't keep my leverages very consistent, and I could notice it in training. So if I wasn't as bloated as I wanted to be, it had an impact on my strength in the gym way too much, so going back, I would have found a better balance with that, to where I probably wouldn't have been as bloated, but I would have stayed like medium bloated all the time, but then just figured out how to put more muscle on from that. Okay, on to the next one. I can't read my own writing now. Okay, here we go. All right, how to exceed in your career. All right, so I don't know how to really take this. I don't know what career you're talking about. So I'm going to kind of go back to the live, learn, pass on thing. Some of this I already talked about a little bit earlier. Is the first thing is, if you're not where you want to be, and quit blaming other people. That's a big thing. Is self accountability is a big one, because you can blame other people for everything. If you spend enough time, you can find a reason why everything that's fucked up for you is because of somebody else. So if you flip that around and then realize that you were the one that made that decision that created that relationship or whatever it's going to be. So put the accountability back where it needs to be. That's the first thing. Know the demographic of what you're doing. So, So if it's, and everything still comes down to sales, right? I don't care what you do for a career. It's still sales. It's still communication. It's still knowing who your audience is, knowing what, and the audience could be, a professor you're working with. I don't know. You just need to know who the hell the audience is. And then you got to be able to work with that demographic, with that audience. It doesn't make any sense to, build a career with a demographic or start networking with a demographic that's not necessarily in the demographic that you're in. So that would be a big one. Persistence is another one. It's a lot of people are really good with networking, which can help. That definitely helps, but it can also burn a lot of fucking bridges too. Because if you're only networking for the sake of networking, then the people you're networking with figure out what you're actually doing. You didn't just burn a bridge, you're building a fucking crossway. Because then they tell everybody else, hey, watch out for this person. This the only thing they're interested in is this. Wham, that fucking road just got shut down. Then you got to find a whole different road to be able to go down. So but networking is extremely important, so that will help expand from there. But if you're building a network completely off into a different sphere that's not necessarily related where you want to go, it has pros and cons. It will give you a different perspective on maybe the route you want to go, which will give you a huge advantage. So anybody that has skills in a certain area that may not know that specific demographic, comes from a different demographic into that demographic, is going to come in with a lot of ignorance towards that demographic, but that's good because it's a different set of eyes that most people that only know that are going to be able to see. So this is why I'm saying you don't want to spend, you have to still, you can't just be in that one demographic and that's it, because you'll lose that. You get a very narrow vision, so you gotta still have, tentacles in different demographics, but not all of them there, because then you lose sight of what demographic you're supposed to be trying to move forward in. Know where you are and know where you should be. That was one that I wrote down there. I think a lot of people get that one wrong. They think they're somewhere higher than what they really are. So, it's like act as if you're already there. I get that. I get the motivation behind that, but you're not. So if you act that way, then you're going to miss out on the things that you should be learning where you are currently. Because there's lessons to be learned as you move through anything. And if you try to skip or hack from, A to B, or let's say you go from A to C and you skip B because you found some hack to be able to jump B. All the lessons that you were going to learn in B, you didn't learn. So by the time it comes to move to D, you don't have the base or the lessons or the knowledge to get to D. So yeah, you hacked it and you made a quick jump, but you might have just cut your foot off in the process. And at some point in time, you'll have to circle back to figure out or learn those lessons that you should have learned, at B, right? So when you know exactly where you are, so you know what you don't know, that kind of stuff, that's going to play into it as well. Obviously, you got to develop the work skills associated with whatever career it is. So if it's, strength and conditioning and coaching and so forth, you need to know the work skills. You need to know the basics behind what you're going to be able to coach. But you also need to build on those basics. So if you're coaching, say you're a strength and conditioning coach and you're working 12 hours a day and you're working with the athletes, you're building the experience 100%. You're building all that, but then you go home and you never keep up with what's going on. You don't have a network with what's going on. You're not seeing what's going on outside of that. You just, at that point, stalled your knowledge base. And you'll never exceed past that knowledge base, which at some point in time is going to put you at a distinct disadvantage, right? So you have to be able to continue to build on your knowledge base outside of what that normal practice is. I don't know shit about computer programming, so I'm just going to throw this out as an example with actually no fucking knowledge really behind that. But if all you did was, work 10 hours a day on the language that and you just pound, 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 you become really good at it, then 5 years from now, that becomes obsolete. You're obsolete because you didn't keep up with the other stuff, because when it was time to stop, you just stopped, went about your own thing. So now you got to, that's like going all the way back to that B again, like I talked about. Now you got to go all the way back there and then relearn whatever this new coding, new language is, just to be able to get back up with the people that know what that is. So now you're behind when you were ahead for a long period of time. That's going to be the same thing in any skill set that you're associated with. You need to be solution oriented, which is another big one, is, here's the problem, what's the solution? Or what are the different multiple solutions that are associated with it? If you don't even know what the problem is, then you can't even begin looking for what the solution is. The same thing working with the athletes. Again, if they have a sticking point, or if something's not moving forward with them, what's the problem? First off, is where is this? Is this mental, physical, technical? Where does it fall? Is this inside, something that's happening inside the sport, inside the gym, or at the home? Where is this issue here? And then once you figure out what it is, then what are the solutions to be able to move that forward, to keep it moving? Because ultimately you still have to keep moving forward. So if it's not solution driven or system driven, which is another one I got in here, then you have to be able to move that way. When I'm talking about solution oriented, it's the systems matter, because, people don't fuck up. People make mistakes, systems break. If systems aren't being used, then the only place you can go is to look at the actual person, right? We fail, we that's part of learning, is we fail, we fuck up, we do all that. But that doesn't mean that the person's a fuck up. That means that the system's somewhat fucked up. So when you're system oriented and solution driven, then it's like, okay, stop. What's the system? Where is this at? What's broke? Like, okay, cool. 80% of this is fixed. Then you kind of do, this is the same thing with training. It's the same with all of that kind of stuff. So if it's career advancement, you need to start thinking that way, because if you flunk a test, that doesn't mean you're a failure. If you're in college and you flunk a test or you flunk a quiz, that doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you failed a test. Then you learn from that, and then you proceed from that point forward. You can't let those little failures define you, and you can't even get that upset about it, because those are where you're going to learn the most. I deal with this now, my kid being in college, trying to explain this to him a little bit. That's where you learn the most from that. If all you ever did was get straight A's and never miss a question, I don't know if I'd ever want to hire the fucking person, because they don't know how to deal with failure. They don't know how to pivot. They don't know how to be solution oriented. Who gives a shit? Because at that point, you got to make sure that everything that ever goes their way, they can do perfectly. And nobody's fucking perfect, right? So it doesn't kind of work that way. And then just the ability to think, to turn down the noise, focus on the solution, and go from there. All right, on to the next one. How has my coaching evolved over time? That's kind of a weird one, because I don't coach, so it's what I do. If there's lifters out here, is I don't do their programming. If they ask me to do their programming, it drives me nuts, because anybody can do that. There's program pushers, everywhere. Everybody's a fucking program pusher. Anybody can do that. That's simple. I mean, people do it now all the fucking time. That's teaching somebody how to auto-regulate, teaching somebody how to know where their body's supposed to be during a lift at a certain period of time. Those are other things and other aspects that I would rather work with. That is where my experience is, and that's what I love to do. So how's my coaching evolved? It's just seeing more and more and more and more and more people over the years through all the seminars and all the other stuff, to be able to say, okay, I've seen this. This is what this is. This is a cue to be able to try to fix it. Oh, that didn't work. Let's go here. That didn't work. Let's go here. And just evolves that way. And then I read a lot, so I keep up with what's going on that's out there. I keep up with it for a couple reasons. I keep up with it because I do like to help the higher tier lifters that will come out here. I really like that, because that's a more complicated puzzle. I like that puzzle. I like to be able to, figure out, here's what this is, here, try this, and then working with them, right? Not telling them what to do, working with them, on how to overcome that. That I like that. So I want to know what's out there that I may have missed, that I don't know, that I might be able to learn from, that I can be able to use and apply in that realm. So that's one of the reasons I keep up with it. The other reason I keep up with it is 90% of it, if not more, it's just another fucking trend. So I want to know what the trends are, because I purposely try to avoid them, because that's where everybody else is going to go. It's like, oh, this is hot. This is what everybody else is doing. They're all going to pivot that way. I want to pivot the other way, because usually where everybody's pivoting, wherever that trend is where the biggest amount of bullshit is. So I want to go the other direction, because I want to stay away from all the bullshit that I possibly can and pivot that other way. And you can see it in the strength industry all the time. If you just watch the ebbs and flows, watch where things go, and then how everybody else follows with it. And then 5 years later, it's bullshit. It's like, you remember all the people that were super, super popular 5 years ago? Yeah, neither do I. That tells you all you need to know, right? So that's another reason why I kind of follow that one. So how it evolves, really, I can't really say that, because I wouldn't say that I'm a coach. I just help some people that come out here, which is, one of the other things is what is this? What makes a successful coach, right? And then there's, do we have coaching interns? I'll get into and then how do you train out here? So there's 3 of them that are kind of all associated with the same topic. So how do people train out here? It's a private club. Or gym. I mean, it's showroom, right? So put it that way. It's a showroom that I train at with friends of mine, and then some of the sponsors that come out here, and then guests here and there. That's it. So there is no, membership fee. There's no, hey, can I just stop in on the weekends and train? Sometimes I'll let people do that. Most of the time I won't, because it's my weekend. I work my ass off. So people need to understand that. I don't think they understand what owning a business really is about sometimes. There's not been a day in the past 15 years that I haven't started answering emails at 6:30 in the morning and then finished answering emails at about 11:30 at night. So in one way or another, I'm working from 6 in the morning to 11 at night. I've been doing it for 15 fucking years. If there's vacations, it's a little bit less, but I'm not always here, but I am always doing something. The only break I really have from it is training. And then a lot of the time when I'm training, I'm helping other people, which is kind of, in a way, kind of working, but not really working for me. Now, so now you start talking about those different training groups, and the people that come out here, I gotta want to have them out here, because I don't necessarily want to spend my whole entire fucking day, entertaining people that for no reason. So, and that's it. There's no mystery behind it. It's, well, how do you come out? Well, usually what I do is I try to keep a couple top lifters out here, and then, they will say, hey, can so-and-so come out? And what kind of person are they? Oh, they're a good person. Fine. That works. That's how that works. What I don't like is when people will come out for short periods of time, 2-3 months, whatever it is, and then fucking disappear. So that's kind of like the Louie in me. So, or they're not consistent, which is another one, which, it happens, the way the ebbs and flows are with that as well. So that's why I try to lean more towards the people who put training as a top priority, because if I have to be here no matter what. Now, if other people aren't here, there's only so many people I trust to close, right? So if I have a bunch of visitors out here, guess who's got to stay here until it closes? Yeah, that's the other part with all that. So there's that as well. So yes, I try to build crews out here that are weekend type crews. During the week, it's a couple days, but I don't really worry that much about that, because most of the training happens during the weekend. Then on the weekend, it really starts to become based upon what's going on. So, and this is how it's always been since Todd, myself, and a few former other Westside guys started training together. God damn, 20 years ago or whatever it was. You know, it's like, look, when this gets to be a clusterfuck, we need to get rid of the people that don't train it serious. You know, so when it gets to a point where, you know, if I come in and all the monoliths are full and there's a bunch of people I don't even know, then we're getting rid of all the people that it's not their first priority. You know, when we get to, if we're not at that point, then, you know, the top lifters can bring in guests and stuff like that. Or if we get on the other end, if we get to the point where we come in and there's only fucking 3 or 4 of us, and because nobody else is consistent, well, we're getting fucking rid of them because they don't pay anything. And, you know, so that's kind of how it works here, to put that, you know, in containment or from that. The interns, you know, we did that. Mark Watt started doing that when he worked for us many, many years ago, and continued that kind of off and on for the past decade. I won't do it anymore. You know, it's there's just too many things that I've seen with it that I don't care to continue with, you know. And it's, you know, we've had schools sometimes that, you know, will come out and bring their class out, and the reason why I won't do it anymore is we don't sell coaching services. I have no intention of selling coaching services. You know, I thought about it there for a while, played around with it, but I think the industry is fucking corrupt and it's fraudulent, you know, so I just put it out there. So I don't want to be a part of that. So we don't do that. So there's, what do I need one for, right? How's it going to benefit the company for me to spend time each week working with somebody on how to become better as training people, right? Well, the one common thing is, let's say there were 20 of them over all the years. I can count 1 out of the 20 that actually showed up to train with us every time we trained. 1. Some of them wouldn't fucking train at all on the weekends, right? And that's when I have, you know, myself and the people that have been doing this shit for 20, 30 years out here. Not at all. So it's like, well, now wait a fucking minute. If they're not even going to want to learn where this shit happens and where it's actually done, but then they're going to leave and they're going to say, I interned at Elite FTS with Dave, then that's a reflection on me, and they didn't even show up to be able to fucking train. So no, you know, I'm not doing that, especially when, you know, the flip side of it is, why should I pay somebody then to do that? Which is the other side of that, when other people are more than willing to pay me to be able to come do that. And the more people that I speak that are actually in the training industry, that have training centers and stuff like that, feel exactly the same way I do, but they deal with it much more frequently than I do. It's like, why in the fuck should they pay somebody to be able to teach them what they spent 30 years doing, when other people would pay them thousands of dollars to be able to intern and mentor underneath them? You know, so interns, as far as the strength and conditioning sphere, no, I don't think I'll ever do that again. Now, if the, yeah, so no. I mean, I'm more than happy if coaches that want to, even the coaches though, over the years that have come out to train with us aren't consistent enough to really learn what the fuck they're supposed to do, don't know how to ask the right questions, don't care to ask the right questions. And so it's, I mean, that's kind of there as well. Now, interns, as far as like media, and I don't want to like chop down the media staff. Interns, as far as like media and, you know, video and photo and editorial and, you know, marketing and all stuff like that. Yes and no. You know, I'm kind of speaking for my staff here a little bit when I probably shouldn't, but yes and no. It depends on what value they're going to be able to add. Because it's one thing, because they do a lot, they do way more work than what you guys think. So it's not like they're just breezing in and breezing out, and there's not a lot of work. They have more work on their plate than they really should have. And the the game now is creating the systems to make it more efficient to be able to get these things done, because we can get more things done if the efficiency is a little bit better. So basically their time needs to be spent on refining the systems to be able to put out other stuff. Now you bring in an intern and they have to teach the intern basic things. What happens to all the systems that we're trying to refine? You know, a lot of people will think, well, this is great because then you can just offload a lot of the work to the interns. No, it doesn't work like that, because you got to teach them all that. And so it's kind of a give and take with that. So yes, but experience is needed, you know, and they need to be able to add value, because to me, what we're doing is too important for it to get, you know, handcuffed, you know, moving forward with that. So that was a weird kind of question answer type thing. Let's try. Fuck, how long we've been going?
Hour 35.
All right, so I can do a few more. All right. I always overestimate how many I can be able to rip through here. That's a big one. Okay, we'll get back to the coaching thing. What makes a good coach? Or what you should look for in a coach. And I've done this several times now. There's a blog on our website, you know, how to rank your powerlifting coach. If you just Google or DuckDuckGo or any of the other ones, you know, Dave Tate, rank your powerlifting coach, or rank your coach, you'll be able to get this list. I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to walk through it in a little bit different context and try to explain it a little bit differently to be able to help people a little bit more. So the first thing, if you want to, or let's go a different angle. Let's say you want to become a better coach, right? And I know it's a very small percentage of the people that listen to this podcast, but this will be anything. You know, it can go back to the career thing. And what's the formal education? So if I'm looking at, you know, myself, if I'm looking at a coach, is this somebody I want to bring out for a podcast? If I bring them out for a podcast, what's the information I want to know? You know, or if somebody that we're vetting to be a coach for elitefts, what are the things that I'm looking for? It's pretty cut and dry. You know, what's their formal education? And these you can rank on a scale of 1 to 5. So their formal education, the higher the education, the higher the rank. All right. So to me, I mean, you can go over the 5, like a PhD and stuff like that. That would definitely be a 5, but I would also put the 5 at probably a master's or even a bachelor's in there from the formal education, and some coaching related field, or a field that you're looking to be able to vet out. Like where is that? You know, and that's formal. Now on top of that, there's a caveat where what certifications do they have as well? So maybe their formal education isn't in that, but they have their CSCS and they have other, you know, reputable certifications, or certifications that I know are good, you know, compared to some of the other certifications, which are just basically seminars that you get a certification from. You know, so that's kind of how I rank there. After that, I want to know, who have they trained with? And this is a tricky one anymore, because when I was vetting and did the coaching call out for the last time, there's a lot of people that were putting things in there, like I train with so-and-so, I train with so-and-so, I train with so-and-so. Then I call referrals on it, and then you talk to the person that they're talking about, like, yeah, I trained with the dude like twice. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, who did they train with for a period of time? That if I could call that person, they're going to say, yeah, the dude made it to every training session. He busted his ass. You know, he went from this point to this point, you know, and was solid, you know, knew how to spot, knew how to load, you know, knew how to do all these different things. That's kind of like, that says a lot, because whoever that person is also, they're going to learn from that person just from being there training with them. So it may be somebody I don't even know or have no clue about, but what level of lifter are they? What level of a bodybuilder? What level of whatever are they that they were with? Because that's that day-to-day showing up type of thing, where a lot of people will talk about the importance of consistency, showing up, and, you know, all these different things like that, and then they don't, right? So it kind of plays into all that, where that gets ranked as well. The other one is who mentored them. That's another tricky one. Like once, you know, or for how long, you know, and that could be, you know, they train, at some X training center for 5 years, and the owner is this person, and they mentored them for that period of time, and who they study under, I guess is kind of what I'm saying, and for how long. That's also going to play into, so you got education and experience. So what we're vetting out here is the education and the experience. And again, for how long? And if I was to call that person, what are they going to say? Well, yeah, they were here some of the time. They weren't here all the time. He was here, he was great when he was here, but wasn't here very much, or she was great during this time period, but then during this time period, it's what's that look? So it's like a job resume, right? So you're trying to build your resume. So if you're in a position to where you can be mentored by somebody, then be mentored by them and act like this person could actually be called at some point in time and ask how you were, and ask these questions. Did they put in the work? Did they put in the effort? How was their coaching ability? How was this? How was this? How was that? All these things. Same thing with, a training partner would be that falls into who they trained with. What's that person going to say? Fucker was late all the time. What's going to be in there? Because this all plays into what type of coach they're going to be. And then what have they done in this? For me, I use powerlifting, but what have they done in the sport? At what level was that? What federation was it? How long? It's elite, not elite, and you got to kind of play with that a little bit, because maybe they don't have the genetic traits to be, that top all-time world record holder or whatever it was, but how close to the top did they actually get? And then again, where was it? Is it some backyard fucking meet where, they're squatting, 2 inches down and an inch up? It's all these kind of play into that, because you want to know what they've done, how long they've done it, what they've put into it. Is this, if you're hiring somebody to be able to help you and they're a powerlifting coach, right? And then they've competed a few times over a period of, several years. And let's say let's flip it around. Let's say that they did break all-time world records, but they only competed a few times in a handful of years, if that. How much experience do they really have in just a handful of years? I mean, this gets to one of the other questions there. So all these things kind of come together with this. And again, you can search this document, Dave Tate, rank your powerlifting coach. It's pretty easy. It's been searched a lot. That's why it pops up almost always in all search engines ranks. Next question down would be, who have they made better than they are? That also has some caveats. If they're all-time world record holder, it's going to be kind of hard to create other ones, but they can create people that are going to be, up there, ranked high. So that plays into this as well. The other one is how many years competing? What's the experience competing? The experience is what we're looking for, guys. We're looking for education and experience, and if they give a fuck. So these are what these questions are trying to vet, right? Because people can fake their education, right? They can hide their education. People can fake their experience. We know this. They do it all the time. People can fake how much they care. I mean, people all the time are telling you how much they fucking care about this, they care about that, and all this other kind of stuff, but their actions don't show that. It's very easy to fake all those things. So how can you vet it to be able to find out for sure? And some people are going to fill in gaps, right? Which is called marketing. So they might lack one thing and then they fill in that gap, but then they're strong in all the other things. So with all these questions here, that kind of takes that all into consideration. How many years have they been actually coaching and helping lifters would be in there as well. So all these things, when you add them up, I have a scale with that. Now, for me personally, I won't put anybody on the site that ranks under, what do I have here? I don't have it on here. The top ranking, which it handcuffs a lot of people, because that's going to mean they're going to need 10 years experience minimum, and most don't, so that's one thing there. To me, experience is king. Education definitely matters, but experience is up there. You need a combination of all these things, is what I'm saying. So if you want to build your coaching resume, or you want to build your resume in the field however you want to be able to position yourself. These are the things you want to focus on. Who are you learning from, and then what are they going to say about you? Who are you mentoring from or training with? What are they going to say about you? Who are you coaching? What are they going to say about you? You know, so everything that you're doing, ask yourself, what are they going to say about me, right? You know, do you know your shit? Do you not know your shit? You know, do you give a shit? Do you not give a shit? You know, are you consistent? Are you not consistent? You know, all these things kind of play into that. And a lot of these things, if you're looking for a coach, it makes it pretty easy to vet out. So I've always kind of put this out here as, if you're looking for a coach, look at these things. Now I'm flipping it around and saying, if you want to become a better coach, build these things, put in the time, you know, build those things up, because those are the things that are going to stick and matter. You can pad a resume and the resume will get you clients and all the other kind of stuff. You can't pad a body of work, and you can't pad experience over time. You just can't, you know, so those things have to be built, because that's what's going to last. And unfortunately, I mean, there are people that can, you know, come up really fast in the industry, make a ton of money and get out. I mean, if that's your goal, there's other ways to do that. I can't tell you how to do that. I haven't been able to do that. But to last in the industry, you're going to have integrity, credibility, experience, and all these other things. Otherwise, you're just not going to last. You know, so you got to look at what that lasting power is. Same way as if you're, you know, a lifter trying to become the best lifter that you can over a long period of time, you got to be thinking about, how do you last that long period of time to be able to go that direction. All right, let's go with another one. Okay, man, there's a lot of them in here that I just noticed I did not put. The confusion for the beginner, body shakes. How to, do I still, this is another weird one. Do I still practice meditation, relaxation, visualization, and all the other kind of stuff? Yes, where these are broad, a lot of these are really broad questions where I don't know really how to go about these, where, I mean, when it's asking what I do, I can just tell you what I do. And it's all encompassing. So you can visualize all you want. That's great. But it's hard to visualize if you're all stressed out from everything else that you're doing. So it's hard to focus when you got too much other shit going on and too much other noise that you can't tame down. So some of the other things that I talked about earlier about taming down the noise, calming down the noise, to be able to do that is a big thing. So I'll just give you some tools that I have been using for years. So I have a notebook I carry with me all over the time. So yes, I have, you know, different project managing programs and shit like that I use. But when it comes to actually laying out a day, you know, every day is laid out, you know, so one section are 5 things. It's usually 3 to 5 things that have to be done that day. And these are not administrative things. These are things that have to be done to work towards, let me step back. So I have a list of objectives that I want to hit before the end of the year: personal, business, family, so forth, training, they're all there. So those are all laid out for what I want to be at the end of the year. Then I break it down into the quarter, then I break it down into a month. So in this book, it says, you know, June, right? And these are master things that I have to get done in June. Now there's going to be big rocks, big things in there, you know, to go Stephen Covey type area. So there's big rocks that have to get done. Then there's a lot of little administrative shit that needs to be able to be done in there, vetting out new items, stuff like that. You know, those have a number of podcasts. All those are kind of laid out for the month. Then when I go to plan out a week, you know, I'll have a page that will say week of, you know, 3rd week of June, whatever it's going to be. Then I take the things from that master list and I put it in that 3rd week of June to be able to lay that out. Then each day there's, you know, it's structured off. There's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are 5 main things that directly impact my ability to get those things done that have to be done for that week, that need to be done for that month. They're not daily to-dos. They're things that are going to take more work to be able to get there, but a little has to be chipped away every day to be able to get there. Something has to be done every single day for those things. So there's never, and they're the 5 highest priority. It doesn't mean they're the 5 first things I'm going to do, but they will all get done that day. Now under that, I got a list that just says admin. And then that's just a bunch of shit that I just have to do that day. You know, reports and change sales calendar, whatever else it's, you know, check fucking, what was yesterday? Check on coffee labels. We're going to have coffee. It's going to be here like next week. So we're going to have some of the labels are getting done. So, you know, check coffee labels. And so this gets to be a big list. It can be 10 or 15 different things that have to get done. Some of them are going to be delegated, some of them not, but I got to be able to have them on there. And then on the next side, it says time. And then I got appointments of things I have to do that day. Podcast at 2, you know, training's floating. So I just write train. And then I try to actually keep that list really, really, really small. So I don't like time things. I don't like meetings with times and stuff like that. Now, some of them are necessary, but I try to keep those per week very minimal. You know, it's just, I work better that way. And then on the next down are going to be things I just write down that I have to get done. I put water, supplements, food, you know, water, supplements, food, visualize, and sleep, right? So they're just reminders of things that I do every single day. But I'm paranoid because I've been doing this for so many years that if I take one of those off that list, I'm going to start fucking it up again. And a lot of those things took a lot of time to be able to actually dial in to the point where it needs to be. Now on that next page, it's just going to be floating ideas, right? So some of it, and this is a big one, is some of it, because I'll start the day and I'll write things over there. I don't want to say a gratitude journal, but we are kicking ass in, and I'll write the things that as a team and as a company, we're kicking ass in. I will admit I do a shitty job and I probably should share those things with my team, but I write them in there just for my own mental health, because I get so caught up in bringing up weak points all the time that I will forget the things that we are actually doing really well at. So if I write those down, it pivots my brain. So I don't just think about the shit that's not right, that I'm actually seeing the things that we are doing right. And by forcing myself to write 5 of those things or 3 or 5 of those things every single day, it allows me to kind of refocus and pivot on there. And then the rest of it is just notes for that day, ideas and stuff like that. That sets my day, right? So some of that might be done the night beforehand. You know, some of it's done that day. Half of it's usually done the night beforehand, so I don't go to sleep thinking, well, tomorrow I need to do this. So it's all there. So that's the start of you'll see where this is going in a minute. That structures my day. Does it take all day sometimes? Yes. Sometimes can I get all the shit done within an hour or 2? Yes. Then I can start doing some of the other shit that I want to work on that you can just really never find the time to be able to do. And there's interruptions and stuff like that kind of flow in there as well. That goes in there first. So I would say journaling, but it's also scheduling. It's also, you know, habit reinforcement and to-do list. It's kind of all put in one place, and they're being pulled from, you know, base camp. They're being pulled from other places as well to be able to put in there. Then if I try to get in 5,000 steps a day, as dumb as it sounds, but you know, I try to do that every day. But it isn't so much for heart health and all the other stuff. It's to clear my mind. You know, so when I'm on the walks, I'll clear my mind and, you know, listen to music that I won't be thinking about work. I won't be thinking about all the other stuff, just clear, like brain fog drop, right? So if I get brain fog or whatever it is, I can just release the brain fog by doing that. In a way, this is a way of meditation. It's just walking, trying to clear your head, you know, breathing, you know, stupid shit like that, just to be able to clear my head. And that helps with that. Unless it's hot as fuck, then, you know, then it's doing something else, you know, of the same thing to be able to do it. Because if it's hot as fuck, then all I'm thinking about is it's hot as fuck, and it's stressed me out because it's hot as fuck. It gets hot as fuck here. So it depends on, you know, where it's going to be. And then before a lot of the time on those walks as well, I'm thinking about where we're going to be, right? Not what needs to be done, but where we're going to be. So it's part of that process. Or if I do a stupid aerobic circuit, which I'll do like a minute on each one of the machines we have here, it's not a big thing. Anytime I start doing any type of cardio aerobic type of work, my brain shifts to where we're going to be, right? So it's a pattern I established many, many, many years ago that's tied with doing that. So that's a big part of it as well. And then before falling asleep, when I'm in bed, I'm visualizing what that's going to look like in 5 years, you know, for what that strategic objective is. So do I visualize, I think what people are asking is, am I visualizing my max effort lift and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, yes, if I have a training goal that I'm training for, yes, I am running that through my head every night before I go to bed, what it looks like, what it's going to feel like, that's all part of that. But that's not, a lot of the times when I get questions like this, people are asking me specifically because they're trying to develop confidence to be able to do a better 1 rep max on whatever lift they're going to do. That's part of it, and that can be other strategies that are put in here for that. But if you don't have the brain in a position to even be able to focus on doing that because of all the noise and all the other crap that's going through there, you're not going to be able to effectively do that. Now, as you're driving and thinking about and going to the gym and all this stuff, whenever you're thinking about your training, you got to understand that is also a way you are visualizing. You know, so how are you thinking about your training plays into this as well. Are you thinking about, well, I'm going to do this if I miss, or I'm not going to miss today? You know, you got to reframe all that stuff into more positive self-talk. So whenever you catch negative self-talk, you got to reframe it. Like, oh shit, I didn't just say that. You know, today's going to be a productive day because, technique is going to be on point. You know, all those times, if you just caught yourself half the time that you have that negative self-talk, just half the time, and then reframed it with a positive statement, it can make a huge difference for you. So there's that one. The next one is Elite FTS ever going to get equipment on the IPF Gear List? It's been a while since I've been asked that question. I don't know if it's like time for people to pay the dues again or not, but no. Last time we looked at that, it was for us to get the combo racks, bars, wraps, sleeves, all the other kind of stuff. It was going to cost just over $400,000 to be able to do this for the 4-year period of time, which would actually end up being more profit than the company actually makes in a 4-year period of time. So how do you justify that? You know, there's no way. We couldn't afford it, for one thing. The second thing, there's no fucking way there's going to be a return on investment on that. There's not, because there's not, you know, so it's a very terrible strategic business move. And anybody that thinks otherwise, loan me the money for free so I don't have to pay it back. Give me the fucking $500,000 or whatever it takes to do it. And then if we actually make a profit off that lifting demographic, I'll pay you 20% of all profits. But you're going to take the entire risk for it. So if it doesn't return, I'm not paying the money back. Right? So the people that have criticized that decision, here's your opportunity. Pay it. I'll give you 20% of all the profits. Hell, I'll give you 50% of all the profits if that's the case. But it's not going to happen. So that, and the other thing that was another gear type of question was, you know, this keeps coming back, and now I kind of see why it keeps coming back, and that's the whole band shirt thing. And I still think that my original thought was it's up to the lifters to be able to decide, you know, what direction it's going to go when it comes to that. But I've now heard, you know, both sides. So I was kind of explaining this the other night that, you know, if I'm the judge and I have to decide on this case, I've now heard both sides, you know, so I've heard that, and I've heard closing arguments, and now the jury is going to be the lifters. But the, where I first kind of went into it as, you know what, this is just an evolution in the gear. It's always, evolved over a period of time. But other things that I didn't take into consideration were, it's for me with Multiply, the WPC and the APF is the gold standard. They've been around the longest. They got the biggest history. And basically if you want to be completely honest, every rule book that was created was basically a copy of theirs with some modifications made to it where, you can't use rubber in their rule book. So the fact is it's against the rules, so if you look at the biggest federation with the biggest reach, it's not legal, so there's that. So if that changes, then, that would change the narrative in my mind. So to me, that's like that's the definitive thing. I mean, if it's against the rules and you can't fucking use it, it just makes, that to me, that just like ends the argument. If other federations want to do it, that's fine. But those lifts should have to be classified in like an unlimited category and be that way. And they shouldn't, the all-time world records and stuff like that should be for whatever federation that's allowing that and only that, which means it's not really then an all-time, where if somebody's getting a carryover of twice their bench press, at some point in time, it's like, when does the carryover become too big? Where with a regular multiply shirt, there's a lot of facets to be able to, and Brian Carroll brought this up with me when he was out here. And this is just a small demographic of people this is going to relate to. But with a regular multiply shirt, there's a big fucking learning curve. It can take people a year to be able to figure out how to use it. Sometimes some people never figure it out. I mean, it's by far the most strategic skill aspect of my experience in powerlifting my entire life, was learning how to use a fucking shirt. And I can't even say I ever really did learn how to use it. It's a motherfucker. So the one thing that I always liked about Multiply is it added this skill element to where if you work the skill and really learned the skill and worked it hard, because it's not an easy skill to learn. If you really, really learned that, then you could beat the person that's genetically stronger than you. So that always had an appeal, a big appeal for me, and a big sales part for me, because that's kind of fucking cool. Now, on the other end, these other shirts, the learning curve is very, very small, very small. I mean, somebody can work with you once or twice and you can figure it out, and you're getting twice your bench carryover, so obviously, yes, the carryover is higher than what you're going to get out of, the other shirt, substantially higher. And many times twice what the raw bench press is going to be. But I don't know if my concern is even with that, because if they could do that and have that same skill aspect to where it's going to take, tons of time to be able to figure it out and a lot of skill to be able to figure it out, I would think probably a little bit differently on that. And if it's just, it's also the other thing that where my opinion kind of moved a little bit is it's impacting, and I should have known a little bit different if I would have thought it through a little bit more, but I don't compete anymore. So I'm not the person that even should have any input on it, but I keep getting asked about it. So I'm going to put it out there, as I keep learning about it. It's impacting all-time world records, and it's not being classified as it was done with an extra piece of equipment that's adding another 200 or 300 pounds to a lift on top of the 200 pounds they might have gotten off the other one. So if it was just the bench and that was like just only used for the bench, I'd probably have a different opinion. But anyhow, like I said, it's against the rules was a huge one for me because it's not in that rule book. The other one is, if you're going to go off of, and I've already kind of done this, by the way, where if you're going to go off of, what's an elite total, what's a pro total, then those classifications need to change. And I had somebody actually do that, and it wasn't based upon a band shirt. It was just based upon the advancements and, the multiply over the years anyhow. And it changed the elite total for multiply, because keep in mind, people are still working off of the original elite total that was based upon raw lifting. So obviously it needs to go up with the multiply, because yes, there's a carryover from that. Where that elite total, I think, changed a couple 100 pounds, you know, almost across the board. Where if we did it with, you know, the band shirt, it would add another couple 100 pounds to that as well, which, you know, is taken. I don't have it right now to be able to look at it. But the reason I was doing this is because if we're vetting out athletes, you know, for the site, and they're going to be, you know, multiply, and I'm going to say they have to have an elite total. Well, what does that mean now, you know, compared to, you know, before? And so now if it's, you know, multiply with, you know, different equipment and stuff like that, then what's that mean and what's that number? And that way I can kind of go from there. So I'm my opinion is still kind of the judge on the bench, where it's still going to be forced to the jury to make the decision. But, you know, on one side, you know, in the biggest federation, it's against the rules, you know, so that's pretty obvious. But in some federations, it's not. You know, it is affecting all-time world record holders, where I don't know what that even means anymore, to be completely honest with you. I don't know how much significance it really has, even in, you know, raw with sleeves, raw with wraps, multiply. And I don't believe there is an unlimited all time. I think if they lift in unlimited gear, band shirts, it automatically makes the all time record be what it is. And the reason why I'm saying I don't know if the all time even has significance anymore is because all time world records are being broken in gym meets. You know, I don't know. I don't want to sit here and bash gym meets. When I competed, gym meets were a fucking joke. But most meets today are, right? It's just how it's kind of evolved. So I can't sit there and say they're a joke. When I was lifting, gym meets were the meets where the judging was going to suck. They weren't going to have official judgings. You know, shit would pass, it shouldn't pass, and crap like that. But you weren't allowed to break an all-time world record unless it was a national. Actually, it had to be a world meet. It had to be in front of world judges. You know, so national records had to be in front of national judges. World records had to be in front of world judges. In some federations, that's still the case. But all-time world records don't have to be in front of fucking anybody. You know, it can be in somebody's garage with 3 friends judging. The squat can be super, super high as fuck, and it's the all-time world record. So I think with so many years of that kind of happening now, probably a decade or so, if somebody tells me they have, you know, an all-time world record, I kind of really don't give a fuck. You know, I want to know what the lift, where it was done, you know, and if it's that federation's, you know, all-time world record and what that federation is. You know, to me, a world record is more important, and, you know, the world record and the longest running federations, to me, are more impressive than an all-time world record set in a backyard gym meet. So, I mean, that should really be anybody. But as an outsider looking in, they don't really know any difference. But I don't know. I think people get a little bit too butthurt out of that, because as the outsider looking in, they don't know any difference. They also don't even care. You know, the people that care are going to be the ones that had the record stripped away, you know, because they went to X and X meet or whatever it's going to be to be able to put that in there. So it's a weird thing. I like using the shit in the gym. You know, I can see how a lot of the variations of, I don't want to say it's a band shirt, of the band half shirt, whatever it's going to be. A lot of those variations can have a definite training effect as far as overload. That can be like reverse band work and stuff like that. It's definitely fucking fun to do. You know, it's fun. It's fun to play around with. It's fun to master. You know, should it be, you know, a world record? And maybe its own federation, yes, but, you know, across the board, probably not. But I don't dislike them. You know, I think that I got a bunch of different ones out here that we all play around with. There's pros and cons to each one of them. they're, like I said, they're definitely fun to mess around with. That's especially if you're fucking broke and beat up like I am. There's really no other way you're going to be able to handle, maximum weights. But at what point in time is it become detrimental because the weight becomes too much? That's just my own self speaking. At what poundage is it, that cost benefit a little bit too far with that? Overall, though, I think it's more than just that. I think it's not really that. It's more the all-time world record that needs some type of correction or some type of, not a reset, but when I competed, if things got out of hand, the next national meet we went to, there was a correction. And it sucked, because mostly I would bomb out, because they overcorrected. So there was like an overcorrection. There needs to, and it's, I think across the board with all the all-time thing, there needs to be some type of overcorrection, to be able to set that apart. And I don't believe it's fair either for anybody to blame it on open powerlifting because it's a database. I think it gets a little further than that. Is the lifters have to decide, this would be my advice, the lifters in each genre needs to decide which federation they're going to give the most credibility to, and then agree amongst themselves. That's where they're going to go. That's what they're going to support. And then those world records, and that's what should be the standard. And then everything else is just going to be the backyard gym meets, and because they're never going to go away, guys. They've always been there. They're always going to be there. They serve their purpose of some sort, but there is a vetting process. Even when I competed, there was a vetting process. So you would have the smaller local meets, and then you go to a state meet, the judging got a little tighter, became a little bit more consistent. And then that qualified you to go to the national meets. Then once you had the national qualifying total, to move on to the world, you had to get, you had to lift at the national standards. And then from the nationals, then there was the world. So if you, were cheating, breaking all the rules, on the fringes, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's, you're not competing if you're not cheating. Look, I get that. I understand all that. If you're doing all those type of things, that gets weeded out through the process to where if you guys just decide, these are going to be the meets that are going to be at the standard for raw with wraps, multiply, bench meets, or whatever it's going to be. And then you all the top lifters get behind that. You will be that, because the federations obviously aren't going to do it. Then you'll be that correction mechanism for that. And then the other lifters are going to want to drift towards that, because that's where they're going to get the higher credibility from that, and the other ones that are going to fall, that won't be able to adjust to whatever that standard is, then they're not going to, they're just going to bomb out of those meets, so it kind of solves itself. Going back to what I've always said is you guys need to get together, as lifters, top lifters. Fuck the federation drama. You get behind the meet directors and all the other stuff. You guys determine what you think is going to be credible for each one of these things, and drop the bullshit between, raw and single ply, and raw and multiply and single ply. And I'll just drop all that bullshit. Everybody understands they're all kind of different sports within itself, but I think you're all kind of now starting to deal with the same federation judging drama bullshit across all spectrums that everybody, so you all have a common issue that you all want to be corrected, just in different realms. And I think you can all at least get behind that. If you all get behind that, then I think a lot of the things that are stressing out and pissing off a lot of the top lifters will get sorted out really quick, because, money talks. Wherever you guys go, the people that look up to you, that's where they're going to go. So I'll just shut it down with that. That sounds a good place to close it down.